If you're new, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. Your support helps me keep bringing you more amazing stories. In today's video, I want to share with you a story that will pull you into a world where the lines between trust and temptation blur. It's about one business trip, one unexpected twist, and one moment that changed everything. What was the one thing that tested a person's boundaries the most? For me, it wasn't money, it wasn't age, and it wasn't even relationships in the traditional sense. It was something far more subtle, the kind of thing you don't notice creeping up until you're standing at the edge, staring at a line you're not sure you can cross back over. I had been married for over 10 years. Life was stable, steady, even comfortable, at least on the surface. But deep down, there are always shadows we don't acknowledge. Little spaces inside us where restlessness lingers, waiting for the right, or maybe the wrong, moment to come alive. For me, that shadow was triggered by someone I never expected, Adrian. Adrian wasn't family, not by blood or law. He was younger, talented, ambitious, a rising star I had been mentoring in the corporate world for years. When he first joined the firm, fresh out of university, he was reserved, almost too careful with his words. But beneath that surface, I saw the spark of someone who could go far. Over time, I guided him, introduced him to connections, pushed him when he hesitated. And though he always treated me with respect, there was a distance between us. An invisible wall. He listened, but he also watched. Always observing, always holding something back. That distance unsettled me, because I couldn't quite name it. And the fact that I couldn't name it was what made it dangerous. The Chicago business trip had been planned for weeks. Originally, my husband was supposed to join me. He often combined these work trips with small getaways. But that morning, everything shifted. At breakfast, with coffee cups steaming between us, he looked up and said casually, "I won't make it this time. Something's come up. You'll handle it without me." My fork paused midair. Without him? That wasn't how this was supposed to go. Before I could respond, Adrian cleared his throat. "If it's easier, I can stay behind too. The firm doesn't need me there." But my husband shook his head. "No. You should go with her. You need the experience, Adrian. And honestly, she's the best person to learn from." I smiled politely, but inside a knot twisted in my stomach. Because suddenly, everything about this trip had changed. As the decision settled over the table, I risked a glance at Adrian. He was already looking at me. Just a brief flicker, no more than a few seconds. But in those seconds, I felt the weight of something I had spent years carefully avoiding. We were going to be alone. And somehow, I knew that mattered more than I wanted to admit. The morning of our flight, the sky outside was gray, the kind of overcast that feels like a warning you can't quite interpret. At the airport, Adrian walked beside me, carrying his own bag with the same calmness he always wore, like a second skin. But this time it wasn't the usual silence. His movements felt tighter, more deliberate. He was fidgeting with his hands as though rehearsing words he couldn't bring himself to say. And I felt it too. That invisible shift, like the air between us had thickened into something heavy, something charged. We didn't speak much while waiting for boarding. Just the necessary words. But every silence was louder than it should have been. Once seated, he took the window seat. I sat beside him. At first, the small talk was harmless. We discussed the schedule in Chicago, the clients we'd meet, the weather forecast. But then, without warning, his voice dropped into something softer, something more personal. "Honestly, it's probably a good thing your husband didn't come." My head turned sharply. "Why do you say that?" I asked, keeping my voice steady though my pulse quickened. Adrian shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Because you're different when he's around. Like you're avoiding something." The words lodged in my chest. My breath faltered. Avoiding what? How could he have noticed? The scarier part wasn't his question. It was the fact that he was right. By the time we landed, the sun had set. Chicago's skyline glowed with 1,000 lights, sharp against the night. At the hotel lobby, the receptionist smiled warmly. "Your family suite is ready, ma'am." I frowned. "Family suite?" "Yes," she nodded. "A spacious suite with 2 beds." My stomach dropped. I had assumed we'd have separate rooms. Privacy. Space. But now the company had booked us into one suite. Together. Adrian stepped closer, his presence steady and composed. "It's fine," he said smoothly. But his calmness only tightened the knot in my stomach. Was it really fine? The door opened to reveal a room far too luxurious for comfort. Floor-to-ceiling windows spread Chicago's lights across the carpet. 2 queen beds stood side by side, dressed in white linen. But somehow, it still felt too close. Adrian draped his jacket over a chair and loosened his tie. "Are you tired?" he asked, his voice casual. Why did such a simple question make my chest feel tight? I stood by the window, pretending to admire the skyline. "A little," I answered. My voice didn't sound as steady as I wanted it to. When I turned, his eyes were already on me. Not just looking, studying. Deep, calm, dangerous. And that was the moment I realized. The boundaries I had always counted on felt more fragile than ever before. Adrian sat on the edge of his bed, rolling up his sleeves with an ease that made me more nervous than I wanted to admit. He looked relaxed, but there was a sharpness in his eyes, like he could sense the shift in the air between us. "I know this is technically a work trip," he said, leaning back on his palms. "But it doesn't have to be all business. We could take a little time to enjoy ourselves, too." I raised a brow. "Enjoy ourselves?" He smirked faintly. "The hotel bar downstairs. It's been a long day. You could use a drink." "So could I." I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. For a moment, my mind had gone somewhere else entirely, misreading his words. The tension inside me was unnecessary, something I had created myself. "Fine," I said, managing a smile. "One drink." The hotel bar was stylish, its atmosphere a perfect blend of class and quiet intimacy. Low lights glowed against polished wood. Jazz hummed softly from a corner speaker. A few businessmen chatted over cocktails, but mostly the place was calm. We took a seat at the counter. Adrian ordered whiskey. I chose wine. The first few minutes were simple, almost too simple. Work talk, casual comments about the city. But with every sip, the air seemed to loosen. 2 drinks in, I caught myself laughing, real laughter, the kind I hadn't felt in months. Adrian was sharper when relaxed, his wit surprising me. "You're not nearly as intimidating as you pretend to be," he teased, tilting his glass toward me. "And you're not nearly as quiet as you usually act," I countered. He chuckled, his gaze lingering longer than necessary. For the first time, he didn't look like the junior I had mentored. He looked like a man. Confident, steady, aware. And for the first time, I let myself notice. I tried to focus on the conversation, on the safe topics. But each time our eyes met, something unspoken stretched between us. His gaze wasn't heavy. It wasn't forceful. It was patient, deliberate, like he was waiting for me to acknowledge what we both felt but hadn't said. I shifted in my chair, breaking the eye contact. My glass was empty, and suddenly the room felt too small, too intimate. "I should head upstairs," I said, sliding my glass onto the counter. "Early meeting tomorrow. You shouldn't stay up too late either." Adrian tilted his head, studying me. A small smile curved at his lips, but he didn't argue. "All right. Good night." "Good night," I repeated, my voice softer than I intended. As I walked away, I could feel his eyes following me. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I wanted him to. The suite was quiet when I entered. I dropped my bag near the bed and headed for the bathroom. The mirror showed me flushed cheeks, restless eyes. What was I doing? Why was I letting this thing grow? I turned the tap, filling the jacuzzi. Maybe hot water would help clear my mind. Sliding into the warmth, I let the steam rise around me. But instead of easing my thoughts, it only made them louder. The bar, the laughter, his eyes. Everything replayed in fragments I couldn't escape. For the first time, I admitted something to myself I had been denying for years. The pull between us hadn't just started tonight. It had always been there, waiting. I had just refused to see it.